Okay, hello everyone and welcome to ScaledOn's next session of our live Q&A where we like to cover trending, hot, impactful marketing topics that we're currently seeing across the agency. I am Courtney. I am the Director of Marketing here at ScaledOn, and I am joined by Alec Newcomb, our founder, chief troublemaker, as he likes to call himself, and really source of all things from his background spanning running one of the very first search engines to driving the AI evolution here at ScaledOn to teaching and mentoring at universities across the New England region. So Alec, I appreciate you joining me today. We've got lots of really cool stuff to talk about.
It's excited to be here. I always love these live sessions where we can answer questions because people have so many, right? As there's so much change going on, it is always great to sort of, be able to talk about the topics of the day with you.
Right, and I think now more than ever, that's definitely the case. So if your website traffic has dropped in the last 60 days, or you're just noticing a lot of anomalies in your data, you are in the right place. We are going to dig into a lot of the changes that Google recently announced. By their own definition, some of the changes they're calling the biggest change in search in more than 25 years. So that's a pretty impactful statement. And many business owners have not heard about these changes. Many marketing agencies haven't really explained them. So we're here today to kind of dig into the changes, how they're going to impact businesses, and maybe some tips on what you can do about it. From our perspective, if you have questions for us, you can drop them here in the chat. If we don't get a chance to answer you today, we will definitely get back to you. So you can drop them in the chat. You can reach out to us at ScaledOn.com. We are here with, everything that we can do to try to help you with the marketing questions and to navigate these changes that are happening. So to kind of kick us off a little bit, Alec, run me through, what did Google announce? What's changed?
Well, I think the biggest, they announced a whole bunch of things, but I think the most impactful piece is, we're all going to AI mode, right? So it has sort of been like in a test preview, they've been trying it out on us, right? Its traffic has been going up, our clicks have been going down, and guess what? It's coming whether you like it or not to all of your experiences. There's no more avoiding it. And I think that is literally the largest change that we have seen, since I probably ran a search engine.
Yeah, and I know that there's certain segments, certain industries or categories that maybe thought that they were immune to the changes of AI mode, local businesses, or different maybe education or professional services industries that maybe thought that, AI mode wasn't going to impact them as much. What do you see as the impact of these changes as it relates to those kinds of businesses?
It's a great question. So I'll dial back. In January, I was in the Google booth at NRF, and they were demoing some of these experiences. And so, it still sticks with me today, where they were having a shopping experience where, sort of Google Gemini was creating a new image every time you refined the search, right? So like the example that they had was shopping for a birthday party for your kids and adding and removing products. So like you took a picture of your backyard, right? It had your table, you would add products, you'd remove products. We actually got to play with it. And every time that, you said, oh, I want the balloons, I want, these napkins, I want this, plate set. Guess what? It changed the image in the background, via Google Gemini. And when I saw that, I said that experience, right? Because it was very compelling. They're going to roll it out everywhere. And that's sort of what they've announced at the most recent pieces, right? We've got agents coming, like we're going to be able to do things inside the search page. And I think the way to think about it is, the days of, we'll call it 10 blue links if you're on a desktop and 3 links on your mobile phone are gone. And it's really going to be this personalized, curated experience. And that prevents challenges, right? As to many businesses, they're used to being like, well, are we in position 2? We want to be in position 1, and there was, a structure that they could sort of follow very easily to understand, hey, how was their business doing versus competitors, versus whoever they wanted to benchmark themselves to. In this new world, we have to think about, like, there's just going to be this incredibly long tail of personalized experiences. And so on one side, I'm super excited about that because that gives us new areas to go explore and sort of help clients get in. So like, and as a real example of that is YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world. it is often underappreciated, I would call it, by clients.
100%.
Because guess what? It's like, oh, we can't do video. It's too difficult. And this is one of these areas which is really changing. You can go today to Gemini and have it, put a video together for you, right? You can stitch together a bunch of product photos and have a video come together. So I think, it's super exciting time. There's a lot of change. That change will be hard for people, but I also think there's a lot of opportunity. It's just not in those 10 blue links anymore. It might be, sort of, I'll call it yard sailed over various places. So it'll take a little more work to capture.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it seems like it's the intersection of what, one might call traditional SEO with what we saw a lot of people messaging around answer engine optimization and generative engine optimization and things like that. And really, in my mind, this is kind of coming through and saying those are not distinct things. It's all in one. You really have to be pulling all of the levers, and addressing all of those factors in the search engine optimization work that you're doing. And I know that, for us, that's always kind of been our principle, was that like it's all SEO. Those are all components of those. And I feel like this kind of solidified that a little bit. But in many ways, to the point that you just made about YouTube and about AI video, I feel like it's also making it, as intimidating as changes, it's making it more attainable as well. It's helping us really focus down on the things that maybe before were out of reach and now have a little bit of more, of an attainability versus, with AI video production and things like that. So lots of exciting opportunities. But you touched on one that I'm super curious about, which is, let's talk a little bit more about agents and, the agents that Google announced, the information agents, and how that will change the search experience.
Yeah, so I think agents have been rolling out in various forms in the Google ecosystem. You saw ChatGPT rolled out agents a couple weeks ago. Everyone wants to talk about agents, and I think like we're literally at day zero of that. Like I think it's a really hot buzzword. I think this will be the first time a lot of consumers come back and are able to experience that. So they're going to have them around shopping, around news. Like today, you might have set up some Google alerts. In the future, you're going to set up an agent that's going to go out and say, hey, you know what? I want to gather news about my company or my industry or these pieces and bring it back to me. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how that gets deployed. I will say from like my early playing, with the various pieces that Google and Gemini have put together, they're not fully polished yet, right? Like a lot of stuff is broken. So I'm interested to see what this is. On one side, the models are getting better. But on the other side, I think there's also, and I want to call it, whether we want to use it AI slop or work slop, you know what I mean? Depending on the context, I think, there's a high bar, right? If like, is this going to be really additive, to my experience? Because at least for me personally, and from the data that I see, more and more folks are going into ChatGPT, right? There's 900 million people on a monthly basis that are using platforms like ChatGPT, and it has a very curated experience. Like if I want to go research a high ticket item, I'm using ChatGPT. And so Google actually has some catching up to do here. And this is where I think they're going to bring in those amazing images that you're seeing in Gemini, right? They're going to bring in some of their other pieces. And we'll see whether it's all sticks together into something that's super compelling, or whether you're like, hey, you know what? That's just not the bar. So I think the devil is in the rollout, where, as you deploy, it's very easy to have an awesome demo. It's another thing to have, let's call it 340 million Americans pounding on it and getting back what they need, right? Because when your kids need to get to an urgent care center, you know what I mean, and guess what? It doesn't show you the right image of that, or you know what I mean, like. And I think
they had 10 miles away when there was one 5 miles away. Yeah, right?
Or it hallucinates the hours that they're open. Like, I think they've had some of these teething problems. They're getting better, right? Like, they're working hard at them. But, I think the devil is in the details, and I can't wait to see it roll out. But I think that rollout is going to be very difficult for a lot of brands, where guess what? Their dashboards are going to break. The
Yes,
reporting
that
to
data
leadership is going to
inconsistency,
break.
right, will be huge. Yeah. And I think that's the component that I think is interesting to remind people of. And like you just referenced, as far as, whether we call it AI slop, whether we call it data hallucinations or things like that, is helping everybody remember that right now these tools are not 100%. And so the importance of human intervention and even QA within any AI searches that you do, whether as a business or a consumer, is huge. And I know that's a foundation of how we work here. We like to call ourselves human led, AI accelerated. AI is very powerful. We're big believers in it, but the humans have to be at the forefront because of those hallucinations and that AI slop. And I do think that, a lot of times that's what we see when we see new models roll out, right? Is an increase in that hallucination and that, kind of error rate at first. So always a good reminder for the audience to, make sure you're QAing and asking for sources of anything that you yourself are running through AI, to make sure that you have accuracy. And something to think about with an agency that you're working on is working with, what are their processes for that, type of QA check. I think it's reasonable to expect that everyone is using AI in some capacity, and understanding how they use it and how they, quality check it, I think is important. What do you think is the most important thing for a business to do in light of these announcements from Google? Like, to your point, data will be, there will be a data instability that makes it hard to make decisions, but yet on the same hand, it's very natural when you see things declining to kind of push the panic button or want to make immediate changes to address that. Like, where would you recommend businesses focus?
I think we should probably split it into three basic buckets of businesses. So if you are a local business, multi-location business, I think there's a different playbook for you, right? Because it's about, it's sort of about the draw radius of your business, right? And how you are increasing the signal. So we know, like, guess what? Google reviews on your GMB are still going to be super important, right? Like that piece hasn't changed, right? So, I would double down on some of those pieces, right? But that's very different than an e-commerce business today. I think it's going to be harder for your products to get discovered. This is a simple piece. More of discoverability is paid. It is not organic. And so you're going to have to diversify in that bucket. So, like if you go to AI mode today, the most often sort of sources that I see on a regular basis are YouTube and Reddit. So, this is an area that we've focused on, is getting clients into YouTube and Reddit, because, realistically, for most brands, if you're, if you're Fortune 500, it can be different. But for most mid-sized brands that we work with, you can't get into Wikipedia. You don't have a mobile app, right? These other signals, which are very important to the algorithm, for most businesses are not attainable. So what is attainable? Places like Reddit, places like YouTube are very attainable for them. And the continuing mix of X, social, Instagram, like, those have been important before, and they will continue to be, as sort of freshness signals into the algorithm. And then I think there's this third bucket, which is you're a lead generation business, or a B2B business, and like the tail has exploded. So the traffic volume has come down, and right, we're sort of in the 0-click era. But guess what? You now can get someone that's much more qualified, right, through the door. And that, can be helpful for higher ticket e-commerce businesses. I'm not sure, if you're selling a product under $20, maybe, I think there's some benefit, but I think, for example, if you have a highly considered purchase, if you are, doing, lead gen for, pools or, things like that, right? Or maybe medical, then guess what? Having someone who's done a lot of their work in either AI mode or ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude before they get to you, and they've really dialed in on what they want. I think many brands have to meet that more, like the consumer and the customer has been getting more informed, but this is going to be like a step change up. and you're going to have to meet them at that new spot, right? Where, guess what? They might not want to run through your traditional sales process because they know what they want.
They've already,
They're
yeah,
ready
they've
to
already done the
buy.
research. They've answered the questions already with their AI agent, and they're ready to move forward. Now, that raises an interesting question, that I think a lot of businesses will probably consider is, with what you're saying, if you're saying clicks are down and you're saying traffic's down and you're saying these things, what are the metrics that matter? How does a business look at metrics and decide what's working and what's not?
So I think this is a really fundamental question where the nature of what we're measuring has to change. So sort of like, before, and again, as you know, I've used this tornado, piece for a long time, right? Because like as marketers, we like the classic marketing funnel. It's easy to understand. There's a top, middle, and bottom, like we're moving people through. The reality is it hasn't looked like that in a long time, but
Nothing
that
about marketing is that tidy.
yeah, that heuristic has stayed around, right? I use the tornado piece, and now I think the metric that I would really focus on is I think there's going to be a move back to these brand metrics, right? Look, for most businesses out there, they are not doing any sophisticated attribution. They're using the attribution in the platform, right? Typically today, maybe they have Google Analytics that are running, but Google Analytics doesn't do a good job of measuring your brand components, right? And so I think this is actually something that's going to become easier in sort of this AI world, is to come back in and let's take the case that you're a local business, right? And say, hey, you know what? Who am I competing against? And how am I showing up? Right? Am I happy with how I'm showing up in ChatGPT? Is it getting to the pages that I want? Right? Is it answering the questions that folks have? And I think we're going to start doing some more, like the top of the funnel metrics are going to become more brand focused. And then the bottom of the funnel metrics are I think going to get even richer, right? Because we're going to come back in and we're going to say, well, wait a minute. In this new AI-enabled world, before we had to have a salesperson have this conversation, but now that sale happened directly. Whoa, wait a minute, like that's quite different. Maybe the sale came through a chatbot. Maybe the sale came through an AI voice-enabled assistant. I mean, we have a client, where 60% of their call volume is dealt with by AI assistant-driven calls. You know what I mean? For tens of millions of dollars in revenue, right? In that era, you're looking at a very different set of metrics. Like you're looking at how do people like using the AI agent? Do they not like using the AI agent? And this is where I think there'll be some surprises, Courtney, at least from what I've seen, is guess what? Consumers are preferring the AI agent to the human.
Right. And I think that there's a lot of I don't know if I can't think of a better word than bias, but I think right now a lot of people feel like they're biased against that. They would be surprised by that. And that's where that testing culture component comes in, right? Of giving it a try and seeing what the data tells you.
Yeah, and also I think the other piece too is that you have to put it in sort of your brand framework, right? So like if your superpower is, hey, we make handcrafted shoes with care, you know what I mean? It may not be appropriate to have an AI agent in your mix, right? You might say like, look, this is just not who we are. We are a small New England business who's been hand making things for whatever it is, 60 years. And guess what? Like that doesn't fit with our brand story. Fantastic. But I think for a lot of businesses, instead of looking at this as, oh, well, wait a minute, this is a cost savings, this is, these kinds of pieces. And I'll give you a really good example for a local business. So we had a local business where they ran their standard hours of being open because that's when people answered the phone, right? So they were open, let's call it 9 to 5. And guess what? When they turned on the AI agent, they could put their hours, to be 24 hours a day. And they got 30% more lead volume by doing that. And so that was an unexpected thing for them to come back in and say, well, wait a minute, like we didn't spend any more money. Like, we're paying for this flat fee for this AI agent. and we now have 30% more business. Because guess what? There are some night owls who are watching, you know what I mean, late night television. And yeah, they called up and wanted to interact with this business. And that surprised them. And I think there's going to be more of those opportunities that come forward where it may not be so apparent initially.
Yeah. What comes to mind as you're talking through those pieces for me is the importance of personas, of knowing your ideal customer. Because this seems like an opportunity to really level the playing field around who your ideal customer is, as opposed to trying to compete with somebody who really, so to use the shoe analogy that you just did, if you're a maker of handmade quality leather shoes, you're not competing with Walmart shoes or things like that, right? And so
You're not competing with Nike.
really, like it's an opportunity to really hone in and as a business owner ask questions about who you really want to be targeting to make sure you can get in front of those people now, because it is an opportunity, I think, to drill down on that more than you've ever been able to before because of how niche the AI answers, can get. Would you agree, or would you think that this kind of, do the bigger players still have an advantage here, or is this kind of a little bit of a leveler as long as you're targeting your right audience?
I think this is a leveler, but I think that the hard part for many businesses is where before they could say, hey, you know what? We focused on Google, check, we're done. Those days are done. You know what I mean? So like Google is still super important. Search is not going away. It's sort of like, people come and say like, well, wait a minute, like TV's dead. No, like
Yeah,
the average
dead.
American.
SEO's dead. How many times
Yeah.
has SEO been
Okay,
dead,
but
right?
like you look at the numbers, right? You can go run the numbers, and again, it shifts. But the average American is watching 3.5 hours of TV a day, right? You know what I mean? Like that's the number. Now it skews much older, right, in those pieces. But guess what? Like if you have
But
your
if
favorite
that's your audience,
but if you have your favorite sports team, you're still watching it. You know what I mean? Like it didn't go to zero. You know what I mean? And I think there's sort of this narrative like, oh, it goes to zero. And I think the hard part for many businesses is, guess what? It got fragmented. Just like you used to have 4 television channels, and then you went to cable, and guess what? You got 40. And now whatever it is, there's like 400 or 500, right? It's crazy,
yeah,
right?
right.
You know what I mean? The number of channels, that are out there. And then if you add on all the channels on YouTube, like, I mean, it's effectively, an endless long tail. And that's going to be the hard part, I think, for most businesses is they can't action all of that. And so they're going to have to pick, right? What's brand appropriate? Is YouTube brand appropriate for us or not? You know what I mean? Is TikTok brand appropriate for us or not? Like, do we want to go after that younger demographic? I mean, look, there's all age groups out on TikTok. I'm not, not saying that, but I think, I would argue that you're going to have to do these things at a higher bar. And the cool thing is AI makes it easier to do it at that higher bar. But because there's sort of this, atomization of all the channels, to replace sort of maybe, what you got from Google, you might have to, put 3 or 4 other channels together.
Yeah. And the importance of, again, tying back to your persona, the importance of knowing your audience so you can pick the channels, as you mentioned, that are the right ones for you. I know the other thing that people will probably be apt to do or consider is we all like control, and change is hard for all of us. So as we notice organic shifting so much, there might be an urge to throw everything into paid, especially with the launch of ChatGPT ads. I know today we're talking a lot about the organic and SEO side of it, but I think it's a natural follow-up question of how do you feel about the concept of should we just spend more on ads?
Yeah, so that might be the right decision for some brands, right? Like I think it's going to come back to like what vertical you're in, who you're competing against, like those pieces. I would say for the majority of folks, I would not give up on the organic pieces. And the reason that I say that is it's going to provide a richer explanation of your brand and your offering to people than the paid ever will. And I think it would be a mistake for most brands to give up on that. So it'd be like if you came back to me and said, hey, we're shutting off email on our website because of what Google is doing. I don't think that's a good idea. You could do it. You could say, like, we're just going all in on the chat bot. You know what I mean? And it's a possibility. But I would argue that customers are going to pick how they want to interact with you. And I don't think that the organic side is going away. I think it's just morphing here.
And do you think that it's still an accurate statement that if you focus on the experience that you give to your customer or your user, and your, like SEO, traditional SEO, right? We talk a lot about EEAT, experience, expertise, authority, and trust. I think those things are still important, obviously. Those are still the tenet. And a lot of the signals that I see, even coming out of the, AI mode and things like that, basically say, if you still focus on those things, if you still focus on the expertise and the authority and being a trustworthy resource and the customer experience, that you still have opportunity, to win there. Is that still an accurate statement? I know it's more nuanced than that. I'm oversimplifying, but do you think that's still an area of focus?
I actually think like we're going to return sort of to like the Mad Men era of brand building in some way. You know what I mean? Because guess what? I mean, we are not far from the average person being able to put in a 30-minute segment together, on their product themselves, like with the tools that they have, where before, like that would have been a, $100,000, $60,000 to $100,000 expense, right? To be like, I'm going to hire a crew and we're going to do all these things, So now, like, the richness of the story that you can paint about your brand is phenomenal. And so I'm super excited about that. I think we're literally at day zero of that journey. And I think, it's going to be a lot of fun to see how people evolve that, because I think brand is going to become more dominant, not less dominant. I think, sort of the folks, and again, I'll pick on Tesla here as an example, right? They don't do any paid advertising.
Oh, yeah, the brand carries it, right?
The brand and the product carry it, right? So like, I think there's more and more examples where, in some prior eras that may have been hard, right? Is to say, but guess what? They care about SEO. Look at like, they actually do a good job at it, right? I think it's gonna be very interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah. Well, we are almost through our 30 minutes here. There's so much to talk about with all the changes and how this continues to evolve. But I know we want to wrap up and respect people's time at a tight 30 minutes here. What I would say is a little bit of homework for those that are joining us today. First, if you've dropped questions in the chat and we haven't gotten to them, we certainly will endeavor to do that. So keep an eye out on the YouTube channel and we'll get back to, to comments, or certainly reach out to you directly if we're able to do that. But otherwise, I would say a little bit of homework for our audience today is drop the query into ChatGPT or into AI mode. See where your business stands. Ask something that you think your customers would be asking to find you, and see if you come up. I think that's always a good place to start. And depending on what that looks like drop that in the chat for us. Let us know. Do you show up or do you not show up? Drop that in the comments. If you're interested in us helping you identify what the opportunity could be for you, reach out to us. There'll be a QR code that's going to pop up on your screen at the conclusion here. We love to start everything out with an analysis of where you currently stand. You can't know where you need to go until you know where you're at. So we are happy to do that at no cost for anyone who joins us today. So scan that QR code, drop us, a message, and we will get back to you about that. Otherwise, we'd love for you to drop us a follow. We will be back again in a couple weeks with another live Q&A session on another hot topic in the marketing world that we see impacting businesses. But in the meantime, lots and lots to discuss and lots more still to come, Alex. So I hope you will join me again. So that we can follow up on this as we see the data evolving and see the rollout happening, right? Like, we'll have much more to say, I think, once we can get our hands dirty with it and we see what's happening. So we will, have you back again to share the expertise and share the information. But I appreciate you joining me today. And I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
As always, it's my pleasure. It's good to take everyone's questions. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.